Welcome back to Rock Guitar Confidential with Scott and Ryan. Today's topic, feel versus technique. And if you've ever wondered what a metronome is, today you're going to find out coming up next.
Oh my gosh, we have a metronome. There we go. That was cool. I want to make sure I come in time, though. Whenever we talk, it's got to be in time.
Well, we'd be doing every podcast at 147 beats per minute.
It's pretty fast. 120 is the standard. You know what I mean? That's where you really get your thoughts most accurately, is in that 120 range. You know
right.
what I mean?
That's right. Like a second, but double time.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And then we'll go halftime about quarter way through the podcast just to make it sound more interesting, you know? And so I think that would be the ideal ratio for that sort of thing.
Indeed. Yeah. So yeah, it's starting to feel like it's almost Rocktober.
It is almost Rocktober. Actually, for me, every month is Rocktober.
Truly.
But the only true Rocktober starts here in a couple days, which is great.
Yes, so, that's right. So many good things are on the way. Halloween, basketball season.
Yep, exactly. Well, we're Kings fans, so I'm not sure how good that really is.
Yeah, but this is going to be the season.
Yeah, the season we be at 500.
That they suck perhaps less.
We got good players.
Season.
We actually have had good players for a long time. We just, for whatever reason, can't put it together. This is very fascinating for all the rock guitar people out there who don't give two craps about our NBA team. Just
totally.
Fully just to lay it all out there. Both Ryan and I are Sacramento Kings fans, which means we're long suffering. We have a lot of solidarity with like New York Jets fans and
Cleveland Browns fans.
Exactly right. We feel a lot of solidarity with that. Maybe I don't know.
What's the
Florida Marlins?
Yeah, I was just going to ask. What's the baseball team that sucks?
We basically, well, hell, my team's the A's too. So I got to tell you, I don't have to do much imagination for that. We were great in the 80s and 90s. Yeah,
I remember when there was that earthquake.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, hey guys, just wanted to say welcome to the Rock Guitar Confidential podcast with Scott and Ryan. Welcome to, I guess, episode 19.
This is episode 19.
For a good one today, because we're going to talk about something that has been long debated in guitardom, which is feel versus technique. And then we're going to kind of do a little side, like the fries that come with the sandwich, of just sort of how to aim for what you want as a player and what's important to have and what's not important to have. Mm-hmm. So we'll start, Ryan, your thoughts on feel versus technique. What's your gut reaction when someone says like something like, oh, that guy plays with such amazing feel, or that guy's just all technique? Like what do you think when you hear that?
My gut reaction is, that is a false dichotomy.
Yeah, it's kind of a false choice, right? You can play with technique or feel.
You in order to play with feel, you have to have the requisite technique.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and I think the thing that's stupid is like, what feel? This is something I've heard Rusty Cooley say a bunch of times, and it makes a lot of sense to me too. It's like, what feel? Which feel you're talking about? Are you feeling like the sad crying feel? Well, that's a good feel. But what about exuberance? What about excitement? What about anger? Those are also feels. You know what I mean? Like just bending a crying note is not the only kind of feel there is. You know what
absolutely.
I mean?
And then conversely, if you're playing in a neoclassical style or a style that is more technically demanding, that's a feel all unto itself. There's a video I've probably for on this podcast where Japanese guitar prodigy and virtuoso Lisa X.
Yes, I know of Lisa X. Yeah.
Lisa X is rad. Mm. She's at a NAMM show, and Paul Reed Smith is lecturing her on feel.
Yeah.
And then plays like White Room or something. He's like, now this is what feel is. It's really...
But it's also, that's feel to you. That's not feel to everybody. You know
it's
what I mean?
cringy.
Yeah, I feel like that whenever I hear Santana being held up as like the great feel player. I'm like, well, he's extreme. I can see the massive limitations in his playing whenever he plays. He knows like three things, and he does them over and over again. You know what I mean?
Carlos Santana, at least on whatever that album was where he had all the guest vocalists.
Yeah, Supernatural. Yep.
Is that what the name of that album was?
Yeah, I think they stole it from the TV show.
Yeah, and that's why everybody in every cover band has to play that song with the Matchbox 20 guy.
Yep.
What is it? Just Forget About It or something?
No, that's the Smooth.
Yeah, I can't even remember the name.
I was only on the radio for like 5 years straight nonstop.
Yeah, and
by the way, the radio is that thing that your parents listen to in the car when they drive somewhere.
Yes.
Yep.
I actually didn't mind playing that song when I was out playing covers, because at least you can if you nail that first little like kind of minor arpeggio kind of melody, there's a lot of room to improvise in the solo.
Yeah, but whenever I hear Santana play, I feel like he gets to a certain spot and he has no other gear. It's like a car with like two gears, and he gets like the second gear, and then he's got nowhere to go. You know what I mean? And he doesn't have enough of a broad vocabulary to do all these other things. And I look at that and I feel like Sure, he expresses himself. I'm not going to take anything from
His
that.
tone is great.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that.
His vibrato is really good.
It's solid. He can play, but he's not like the guy that's being held up like he is. Like, oh, he's just amazing guitar player. It's like, well, no, he's not. Have you heard of John McLaughlin?
Right.
Have you ever heard of Al Di Meola? I mean, like,
totally.
He's a very good at what he does.
Have you heard of Neil Schoen?
Yeah, exactly. Or Steve Vai.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
well, I mentioned Neil Schoen because of the Santana connection.
Well, he got his ass kicked by Neil Schoen.
And then Neil had to go start another band. Yeah.
Because he was feeling the limitations of that band.
Well, and you know what? To expand on this some more, Carlos is the worst offender when it comes to using what I call the neener lick. It's the lick that every guitar player should avoid.
Yep. Is it like the cockadoodle-doo lick? Is it kind of...
No, that's Mark Tremonti, but it's related to the cockadoodle-doo lick. The cockadoodle-doo lick is actually more sophisticated than the neener lick. Two notes, either a whole step or a minor third apart, played back and forth. Neener.
When he tries to play fast, it's always like tremolo picking on one string with like 3 notes. You know what I mean? And that's
and the pick isn't hitting those notes at the same time that the fretting
and he
fingers
can't
are.
alternate pick cross string. He has no legato really. It's like I just why I feel like he's just like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? I know that's oftentimes how I feel with that, and I don't begrudge that he's expressing himself. I think that's
not at all
to say, and I think
seems like a really nice dude.
Well, I don't know, man. I've heard some interviews with him where he kind of came off as a little bit of a douche.
Oh, so he deserves it if we like rip into him. Okay,
because he's got like a master class. I'm like, oh man, you
I was about to mention
you are the one representing all of us guitar players. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I actually thought about
Vai doing the master class. You know what I mean? It's
they did a deal on master class, and I actually was thinking about buying, like last holiday season. I was thinking about buying myself the on sale subscription because it seems like a great idea, a streaming service
where you can study with all kinds of people, which is great.
Yeah, but Carlos Santana as the guitar masterclass guy, why?
Him and like Tom Morello are like the two. It's like because they're famous. That's really what it comes down to. It's not about skill, because I guarantee you, like Neil deGrasse Tyson is a wonderful scientist. Yeah. But there's people that teaching at MIT and at Caltech and Harvard that are probably much better and much more acclaimed scientists who published more than him. But you've never heard of them, so they're not going to do a masterclass.
Yeah, they're busy smashing atoms together.
Yeah, exactly. Understanding space-time in ways that Einstein couldn't have even thought of.
Right.
And now Neil deGrasse Tyson's a great scientist, but he's also he's a very famous guy, and that's why he has a masterclass. Because I'm famous. Why is Bob Iger doing the thing on leadership? Well, because he's a famous CEO.
Right.
Why is Carlos Santana? Because he's famous. Everyone's heard of him. That's why he's doing it.
I'll bet it's also because most of the people who would be buying a masterclass subscription are going to be like older.
That's true. I think also partially people who aren't immersed in guitardom. They don't really know guitar. They just think, oh, Carlos Santana, well, he's a legend.
Yeah, I've heard his name before.
Yeah, exactly. And I should study from him, but you're not going to learn shit because he doesn't know anything. I mean, I've heard him talk. He doesn't know anything about what he's doing.
Oh, no, not at all.
He's just like, yeah, you got to play with feeling, man. It's like, okay, cool. All right, but what scale are you using?
So I think,
what's the chord changes you're playing over, and how do those chords interact with that scale? You know what I mean? That's what I need to know. I don't need to know play with feel. Like, what does that mean? That means nothing.
I think you're really touching on the crux of the matter, which is the people who talk all about, oh man, you got to play with feel, are the people they have to hang their hat on that because they don't know anything else.
But what feel? Which feel are we talking about?
Right.
That's the question that comes to, like, which feel? You know what I mean? Okay, here's this really cool thing. It's 160 beats per minute, double kick and 16th notes, and you're in 5. And it's going to be something that's atonal with a diminished harmony above it. So I want you to improvise over that. Mm-hmm. How do you feel your way through that?
Wait, what's 5?
Yeah,
what?
That's what I'm saying. Like, you can't feel your way through that. What you're basically doing is making excuses for your limitations.
Yep.
That's what it comes down to. And
Agreed.
And I just look at that and I think, like, stop being a crybaby and stop trying to pretend like your limitations don't exist and acknowledge where they are and go after them. That's the only way you improve. And then no one's ever done. No one's ever a finished product. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's something that's really important to understand too. Everybody's always a work in progress, no matter how good they are.
And here's the thing: is that it's fun to learn about. Oh, hey, that's in 5. I had a student this past week where and again, since Halloween is approaching, I'm taking the lessons in a creepier direction. There's a this year's Halloween song is Mr. Crowley.
All right, nice.
Yes, you can see my handwritten transcription for the second solo over there in the corner. Actually, no, that's the first part of the song. But anyway, so a couple years ago it was Tattoo Vampire by Blue Oyster Cult. Every year, one year we did Poison by Alice Cooper.
Yep.
You know, which is like, I should have been Feed My Frankenstein, but
that is a good song. Yeah.
Oh, it's great, but I think they're tuned to E flat standard.
You just don't want to deal with having to make them tune down or something.
Yeah, it's, yeah.
I always tell them, like, we're just going to do an E. We're not going to do an E flat. And just if you play along the song, they tune down. But I don't care about that.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. Funny story about Mr. Crowley. One of my instructors in music school actually auditioned for Ozzy. This is around the time that Zach got the gig.
Okay.
And he told a story about how, I guess, when they were in rehearsals to doing the audition, I guess Ozzy started singing, Mr. And I guess this, I'm not going to say his name, it'd probably be embarrassing. This player said, like, no, it's missed, it's up, you're a little flat, go up a little higher and hit the note.
End of audition.
Exactly. And I'm like, Are you out of your mind? What are you doing? Let him sing Mr. Crowley for the 50,000th time the way he wants to sing it. Do you want the gig or do you not want the gig? So I'm like, okay, that explains why you're teaching at MI.
Wow, that's rough.
Yeah, I was just like, you're going to correct Ozzy on Mr. Crowley. Really?
No, not at all.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, even if he was just
rubbish.
rambling through the notes, like, he's still just, Ozzy, awesome, dude.
Yeah, Ozzy's just there to be there.
Yeah, it's even awesome that Ozzy even showed up for that. I mean,
right?
It'd be like, why would he go do that? Just have the band say, this guy's good.
Yeah, they could have just had management.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just figured out. Yeah,
seriously. So it's I don't know. That's a funny story. I remember thinking, like, why are you correcting him? That doesn't make any sense. Even at like 19, like, are you crazy? Are you nuts? Like, what are you doing? Don't do that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so the reason I was thinking about it is, I played Diary of a Madman for one of my students this past week, and I tried to explain how the verses are in 7/8. And actually counted it out, and I was like, "Here's what that means, right?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
And seeing how like the lyrics match up and everything. And dude, it blew their mind. They were super stoked, and it was exciting to learn about it. And it was a great lesson, and it was awesome. We learned stuff, and learning stuff is fun.
Yeah, sometimes. I think that you have to have people open to that. I think at the end of the day, there's people who are willing to have their understandings expanded, and there's people who are not. And no matter how exciting it might be to you or me or somebody else, you have to acknowledge that, okay, that person is not going to be that person. And the world is way more filled with people who are not interested in having their consciousness expanded than people who are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Those people, need to be respected, and they have a right to do what they're going to do. But That being said, like, they don't get to make the rules about who's playing with feel and who isn't. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of foolishness. You know what I mean? It's
wholeheartedly agree.
And I think that whenever
perhaps, it sounds to me like you're describing the average Pearl Jam fan.
Yeah. Well, there's so many others. I think that even guys who like rock guitar, and I think you and I probably encounter this as instructors sometimes, is they'll say, like, I really like, like Yngwie and Randy Rhoads and stuff. I'm like, okay, cool, we got to work on these things. And you go, oh, I don't want to do that. It's like, well, then you're not going to be able to do those things.
Dude, and how many times has someone told you, Yngwie has no feel?
Yeah, well, what feel are you talking about?
That's crap. Yeah, he's got total feel.
He's got fire up the wall. He's just so fiery guitar player. You know what I mean? And,
absolutely. Didn't he release a blues album?
Yeah.
Recently,
which I'm sure, because spoiler alert, like, if you just played a whole album of blues, it'd be boring as hell. So he played a bunch of other stuff that wasn't just blues, because you have to, because that would make people want to listen to it.
You know who released a really killer rocking blues style album? Have you ever heard Jakey Lee's Retraced album with Ainsley Dunbar on drums?
That's more of a classic rock album, I think, than it's necessarily a blues album, though. But it's funny. A lot of classic rock is so influenced by blues. It's hard to tell the difference. You know what I mean? They kind of are the same thing. I love that album. It's absolutely great.
So good.
And Thomas saying he's got Tim Bogart on bass on that.
That's right.
Which is really, really cool. That's Vanilla Fudge. So
and for the longest time, that was the only Jakey Lee stuff that was available. It was like
he had an album in was it something Pink Mist, something Fine Pink Mist. It was an instrumental record, even in Japan only.
Isn't Fine Pink Mist, isn't that what they used to color ground beef at the meatpacking plant?
I have no idea.
I know you don't, but I have to throw that out there.
But I know that I've got that record. It's pretty cool. It's an instrumental record he did back in like the mid-'90s.
Okay.
And released, I think, only in Japan. I don't think it was ever
no
released
wonder.
in the United States. But I mean, anyway, the point I'm trying to make, though, is that, I would say Eddie Van Halen plays with tons of feel. Randy Rhoads plays with tons of feel. Steve Vai plays with tons of feel.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Joe Satriani plays lots of feel. And whenever I hear someone say, oh, those guys are a bunch of scale jockeys, I always think, oh, you don't have any technique, huh? So you're just so angry and jealous that these people can do things you can't do that you got to start insulting them rather than recognizing and dealing with your own limitations. You have to sort of try and take someone else down. You know what I mean? And that's so tiresome.
The goal is to get your skills and technique and feel to a high level, so that you can then take down Carlos Santana like you and I are.
You got to also forget your martial arts because he's a master ninja too. So
yes, let it be acknowledged. We took down Carlos Santana.
I just think that I don't understand. I don't understand the sort of taking like lots of pride in mediocrity. You know what I mean? I don't.
That's a theme that runs through our podcast.
I don't get that. You know, it's like, why be like, oh, I'm cool that I have all these limitations. Like, you shouldn't be. You should be totally willing to work on those limitations and make yourself better. No matter how good you are, you can always be better.
Well, sure. And, you know, it really isn't a competition. And, you know, speaking for myself, I'm not all things to all guitar players, but I sure do love learning new things. And I'm not going to stop until I'm dead.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's never going to be a time where you don't learn. There's always going to be more to learn. And there's always something you can improve upon. So the idea of I'm cool where I am is so foreign to me. You should never be cool where you are. You should be always working on something more. You know what I mean? And that's going to just expand what you're able to do if you have any kind of creative outlet. If you're making music or even jamming or something, it's going to be tools you can use. You know what I mean? And sometimes those tools, by the way, are not tools that are going to be readily apparent where they're useful right now. And you have to just trust that the more tools you put in your tool bag, the more options you're going to have.
And the first time you take out that tool and use it, you might build something that's lame the first time.
Yeah, it's true.
And then, you know, you have to use that tool over and over again until you get good at using it.
Yep, exactly. So, and I think that you have to be okay with that. I think there's that thing we talked about on a previous podcast, like the student's mind. Having that student's mind and not thinking of yourself as being done or finished, and always taking the approach that I'm working on new things and always expanding. That is such an important part to being a good guitar. I think humility is actually, and that might sound like we're trashing Carlos Santana, but
because we are.
The reason I'm trashing him is because it pisses me off that someone who's talented like that has decided to just stop their growth and say, I'm good, I'm great, I can express myself. And instead of just constantly overturning new stones to get better and better and better, they sort of stopped and put themselves frozen in amber and said, this is where I am.
Well, and even that doesn't bother me so much. It's just don't peddle a master class. You know, just like, let's recognize that that's who that dude is. It's the Kirk Hammett factor.
Yeah. Kirk Hammett's a much more accomplished guitar player than Carlos Santana.
He is, but I don't think he picks it up until he has to go on tour or track the solos.
Now he's like that because he's rich and fat and happy.
I mean, he did release like a solo EP, which sounds like it would be right up my alley because he's a total horror fan, and I think that's great. Yeah, you know, because so am I. Yep. I would love to hang out with Kirk Hammett and talk about, you know, old, you know, 1920s and 30s classic Universal and RKO pictures, monster movies and sci-fi and stuff. I don't think I would talk to him about music at all.
Yeah, but you know, I'll be a lot more interested in hearing like a 26-year-old Kirk Hammett's instrumentals album rather than a 60-year-old, you know, been rich for decades Kirk Hammett's, you know, because it's going to, by the nature of it, going to be super self-indulgent kind of stuff. It's not like he's fiery. He doesn't like want to prove anything anymore. It's like that. I'd want
to ask Kirk, like, dude, what was it like when you were in Exodus?
Yeah, you know what I mean. But but think about his music though. I think that now, you know, that success in Santana, you probably, and actually I would say to a degree Eric Clapton, you put them all in that same bag. Where it's like success has not been good to them as players. They basically, and Jimmy Page too. Jimmy Page is another classic example of like a guy who, you know, has been famous for decades. You know, why should he work anymore? You know, he doesn't have to get better. He's, hey, I just do Jimmy Page stuff. And it's like, you know, I look at a guy like Jeff Beck, and I think, well, Jeff Beck doesn't just do Jeff Beck stuff. He's always turning stones over and trying to get better. You know what I mean? And Satriani has always come up with new ideas and new takes on things. And Vai look at this thing Vai just did this year. It might be the coolest thing he's ever done.
Even a dude like Mark Tremonti, who gave us the cockadlick and played in one of the worst bands in history.
Has grown exponentially.
Yeah, absolutely. He never gave up. Like, that's a dude who I despise Creed. Mm-hmm. I really do. But I would totally love to sit down with Mark Tremonti and talk about.
He seems like a hell of a cool dude too.
He seems like a super cool dude, and you know what? If you had to sell your soul to help, you know, bring Scott Stapp to the world, you got to look
at the time that Creed came out though, and before you judging too harshly.
Oh, of course.
Look at all the other stuff that was going on in that time period. You know what I mean? And
I know,
they were one of the least offensive bands from that.
I don't
time
mean
period.
to be a presentist.
Limp Bizkit was bigger than them at the time. Let's just put it that way, and that was not a good thing for any of us.
Yeah.
So the point I'm trying to make though is it's really offensive to me that people just stop. And I think rather than saying, "Cool, I'm going to play with what emotion is necessary for this particular piece of music I'm trying to get across to get the right feel," they just make excuses for why they can't do it more. And then, I mean, I always tell people this. Like, I've said this a million times. Everyone listening is going to be sick of hearing me say this. There's no advantage to ignorance. There's no advantage to having less options as a creative person. You want more options.
You know what I mean? I do, you know, so I do remember, since I was a kid who spent hours in his bedroom trying to learn every part off of every King Diamond album. Right? I tried to learn all of Andy's solos note for note.
It's very ambitious too for a kid.
It's funny, once I learned how to play Mr. Crowley, right, which has a bunch of great stuff in it. There's arpeggios, there's some legato technique.
From a chord perspective, that song's got some great stuff going on too.
Oh, so good. Yeah. There's just so much to it, right? There's killer pentatonic phrases in solo number 1. There's that monster ascending F major run in solo 2. So much good stuff. So yeah, I remember like it must have been, I was back in Alabama for my grandmother's funeral. And my cousin, who was a little older, we went to this music store that was in the mall. Like there was it was a unit in the mall. That's where the music store was.
That's a very 80s thing.
Yeah, like in between Contempo and
next to like the music store
and like Camelot Records or something. Yeah, right. And then like across the way was Orange Julius.
Yeah. That's a very time capsule, like late 80s.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I mean, it was Alabama, so I'm sure there was like a fried critters booth and
bring the roadkill. We'll throw it in the fire.
Yeah, and like marry your cousin in like 30 minutes. Yeah, like so I'm sure that was there too.
Well, if it was a city big enough to have a mall, it probably was a very reasonable part.
This is Alabama we're talking about.
No, Birmingham is like a town like any other town. You know what I mean? Like it's dude, trust me. Whoever in Alabama who's like reasonable, they always visit the few cities there are in Alabama and they just stay there. It's almost like they have a moat around the city.
A moat filled with alligators.
Keep the riffraff out, you know what I mean?
So the town of Walker Springs, Alabama has like less than 20 people in it, and I'm related to all of them.
That's got to be like that's like the average.
I think so. Oh my god, I could tell tales of Alabama. That could be a whole podcast. So anyway, I went into this music store and I bought this scale book, Scales and Modes, but it was really really simple. So it would just it would give you. Here's the harmonic minor mode. Here's some licks in the style of Yngwie Malmsteen, and so on and so forth, right? And then all the 7 modes of the major scale and all that. And I believe they were all diagrammed out. It wasn't tabs. Yeah. They were diagrams.
Here's a scale shape for harmonic minor, scale shape for Dorian, a scale shape for Phrygian, and kind of thing.
Yeah. So I just I remember, and at the time I must have been 12 or 13. I just remember jumping to that, getting home, and then trying to learn every King Diamond song.
Yep.
And so I kind of skipped over all the pentatonic exercises and studies.
Yeah.
I was just like, screw this. I'm gonna go modal right out.
Yeah.
Because I remember being a kid. You're looking for. I want any edge.
Yeah.
Everyone else is zigging, so I'm gonna zag.
Well, I think also you don't realize how much of that pentatonic stuff is actually imbued everywhere. You know what I mean? It's a part of everything. You know what I mean?
Oh, it totally is.
If you skip that, you leave all these holes. You know what I mean? It's I always try to explain that to students. Like, you don't want to skip this. You want to know this, and we're gonna get that too. But you need this too. Yeah. Make sure you get all of no advantage to ignorance. You need to know all these tools.
I distinctly remember backtracking.
Yep.
And at the time I remember listening to a lot of Jake Ely's Badlands albums,
which is all pentatonic.
Yeah, like
blended
here's
with diatonic stuff. You know what I mean?
That's right. Like here's a dude who uses the pentatonic scale. Yeah, so I totally backtracked. Like I could have played any harmonic minor, melodic minor, whatever. I mean, I didn't know all the theory behind it either, but
you knew it sounded cool. And,
I knew it sounded cool, and I could play it in different places and stuff, and my ear knew like how to hear.
Yeah.
But so I thought that was an interesting path. I remember going back to pick up all the pentatonic knowledge and stuff as a teenager after. Yeah. So anyway.
Thank you for listening to the Rock Guitar Confidential Podcast with Brian and Scott. All right, please make sure to rate and subscribe. Now let's get back to deciding whether feel or technique is king. I think we all know the answer. Back to the show. One thing I would say too that I want to kind of make a point that we got to talk about what to aim for as a player. I think that's a great point of what to aim for. But when it comes to feel versus technique thing, I think that's a false choice. I think that, like you said, to have any kind of feel, you need technique to achieve the point where you have feel. That's really important. And just because you're playing technique doesn't mean you're not playing with feel. And just because you're playing with no technique doesn't mean you are playing with feel. And I think there's no hierarchy. There's no more valid musical choices if you play with less technique or vice versa. There's more complex is not better than not complex. Music is just what it is.
Well, what technique is it's control.
Yeah, and choices, options. You know what I mean?
That's right. So if we just substituted the word technique for the word control, do you want to play with feel or do you want to play with control?
Yeah.
Well, that sounds silly now, doesn't it?
Even that isn't silly because you don't have to choose. You're going to do both. You know what I mean?
And how can you play with feel if you have no control?
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't make any sense at all. So that just tells me, like, when it comes to what should you aim for in terms of if you're a guitar player and you want to know, like, what do you need to know? That answer, to be honest, is going to be different for everybody. There's not like a one size fits all. Everyone needs to have this. But I would say to have a good, solid feel for what you should aim for, you need to have decent technique. That basically means you can play, let's just get real technical. Say you're playing pentatonic scales and you have to be able to do things like group of 4 sequences, triplet sequences. You need to be somewhere in the area of 120 to 140 at your max speed, beats per minute to the metronome. Diatonic, you need to be able to play sequencing and 16th triplets somewhere in the 100 to 120 range at your top end. You need to have that ceiling to be able to have, enough control and ability to be able to play whatever you want. When it comes to understanding what tools, you need to have a good understanding of triad and seventh arpeggios, how they play over the chords and play diatonically. You need to know double stops, thirds, sixths, fifths, and you'll be able to visualize them everywhere. As far as the more advanced scales, getting into things like harmonic and melodic minor, that's going to be a choice you have to make. If you like progressive metal and fusion, then you need to know those scales. That's really important part of those kinds of tools. If you're not that guy, if you just want to play classic rock or pop, then you maybe don't have to know the
Or if you're into neoclassical, which has heavily influenced modern metal. I don't think you can be a modern metal player.
Yeah, I would say more so than the blues rock stuff, because the metal initially was really very blues influenced initially, and then that really kind of changed over after like the Yngwie thing happened and became more of a classical metal.
Oh yeah, you got to know some Phrygian dominant.
Yeah, and blend that with like thrash and death metal, then that's kind of what modern metal is now. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I don't know that's necessarily to the advantage to modern metal that there's not that element of blues anymore.
I agree. It can go both. Yeah. The one, I think the ones who do it best are the ones who weave in and out.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. Who aren't one dimensional.
Yep.
But I think that you should aim for that as far as and the other thing too is harmony. You got to understand harmony. That's something that everyone wants to skip over. That like the chord structure and the chord harmony is everything. Well, if you don't know that, you can't do anything. You know what I mean?
So Scott, please tell our listeners, what is harmony?
Well, harmony, the definition of harmony is going to be two wrong notes played at the same time. But chord harmony basically means how do keys work? Like how do you harmonize a major or minor scale, or by extension a Dorian or Phrygian or Lydian or mixed Lydian mode, and how does that relate to the key center that you're in?
So the words key, scale, and mode are essentially referring to the same thing, just with nuance.
Well, the key to my mind is really the harmonized scale. The understanding, harmonized scale basically means you build a major scale and you build a chord off each step of the scale, and typically referred to as the 1 chord, 2 chord, 3 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, 6 chord, and 7 chord in a diatonic key. You got to know. If you don't know what I'm saying, then you got to learn that.
Totally.
You have to understand how it relates to the minor key. You have to understand how it relates to modes, and then you have to understand when you're deviating from it. If you can't do those things, then you're going to be extremely limited in what you're able to do. You're going to be guessing. You're going to be guessing. Maybe the scale works over this. Maybe just which is why when you listen to when someone like Ryan or I listen to a guitar player, we can hear when that's happening.
Yes, absolutely.
We can go, okay, they don't have a clue what they're doing. They're just like trying stuff. You know what I mean?
And for anybody out there who's listening, words like diatonic aren't scary. It just means that you're staying within the scale.
Yep.
You're just using the notes of that scale.
And non-diatonic means you're not doing that.
It's funny. I had a student who just switched over, just started taking lessons with me at Skip's Music down in Elk Grove, and he came from somewhere else. And he's been
like
playing
another dimension somewhere, like a portal.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, he's from somewhere.
He's from the Gremulok dimension. He actually has 4 arms.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of like
from Mortal Kombat.
You're right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, he got tired of beating up on Sub-Zero and decided to take up a more creative pursuit. So now we're playing.
Whenever he's playing the harmonic minor scale, you finish. It's like finish him.
Yeah. Dude, he wants every solo to be a fatality.
Exactly. Flawless victory.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So after Shang Tsung banned my teaching studio, he had come from taking lessons at another establishment.
Yep.
And so of course I asked him, well, here, can you show me your folder, show me your papers, right?
Yeah.
And
wow, it's like a border agent.
Right, can you show me your documentation, sir?
Show me your papers, please.
Yeah, that's right. I need to see some ID.
Yeah.
And and so it was like diatonic arpeggios in G major, And I'm just thinking in some other various like grab bag of stuff, the dude's a beginner.
Yeah. Why are you starting there?
Yeah, we just learned where all the natural notes are on every string.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, that's amazing that they have the student with the patience to do that. Like, wanted to mess with that. They want to go straight to playing. Man, let's play that.
Oh, dude, that's
song.
lesson number 2.
Yeah.
You're going to write down every natural note on every string. Here's what a whole step is. Here's what a half step is. You know, do it in pencil if we have to make any corrections. Keep the B's and C's.
I'm not suggesting you don't do that. I'm just
F's.
saying that, like, just having a student who's like, you know, willing to just roll. That's such a gift when they're just willing to roll with it. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, let's just learn this stuff, man. Come on, we'll go through this together. You know, we'll get to the good stuff too. I promise. But let's.
Dude, I tell everybody, like, after you fill out all your natural notes, then you have a map of where every natural note lives on every string. So you are going to play every natural note, and you're going to say the name of the note out loud. That before you get on to any chord practice or learning a song or any other thing, it's going to be your habit for the rest of your life until at least until I say you don't have to anymore.
Exactly.
But, so this poor guy comes to me, and I to him, it sounds to me like the person you were taking lessons from before was teaching themselves you.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, and that's rough.
Yeah, it is.
So it's so you know, words like diatonic aren't scary.
Yeah.
Words like mode aren't scary. A lot of these things, you know, are kind of referring to almost the same thing.
Well, I think what's hard for someone who's starting out to understand, and I don't blame it, how would you know, is that you have to learn things in a certain order and things built. It reminds me a lot of mathematics. Like, you don't start with calculus. Right? You start with, I got 2 apples, and then I added 1 more apple. Apples do I have? And then you go, okay, now take away one of those apples. You start with that, right? And then you sort of build on it. Okay, now what if I took 4 apples, then I did it 4 times? How many would I have? You do multiplication. You do you kind of build it little by little. Then you move on, and, like, you know, very simple algebra. Then you work on geometry.
And then once you've mastered calculus, you can audition for Polyphia.
Exactly. That's the main thing, right?
That's the main
mostly
thing.
A written test, right? No, but I'm trying to say, though, is you have to learn things in a certain order. So if you have just a grab bag of information, that doesn't work. That's why you can't teach yourself off of YouTube. YouTube's got a lot of great information, but you need to go things in a certain order. You can't just grab whatever you want, because there's things you don't know that you need to be aware of. So you have to have someone to really guide you through that, which is why the people who I'm bored, I'm quitting, starting with a new teacher is the death of your playing, because you're going to do that for years and you're never really going to get anything accomplished, because what you're really trying to do is avoid doing work. When that happens, like, you're really just trying to avoid learning. And if you have a good teacher, they're not going to let you get away with that. So the people that you're running away from are probably the people you should have stayed with, because they're the people who are going to help you learn.
So much of taking lessons is about accountability.
Yeah. Well, and I think also about your own accountability to yourself.
Yeah.
Like, because you're the person who's hurting yourself at the end of the day. You know what I mean? It's huge. And I think things like, I want to play with feel, or this doesn't have feel, or just if you kind of unpack what that really means, it just means you don't want to work. You know, you don't want to learn more. You don't want to challenge yourself.
I guarantee, like, even if a band like Polyphia isn't my thing,
which it's not.
It's not.
We can agree on that.
No, not at all. But
they're good players. I'm not saying they're not.
Yeah, they're great. Like, you could take, what is it? Tim Henson is the guitar player.
Yep, he's also amazing with Muppets too.
Right, totally.
Lifelike.
Yeah, dude, his Miss Piggy is on point.
Yep.
You could drop him into Pearl Jam tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right, you couldn't drop a Pearl Jam guy into Polyphia.
Not even close. Yeah,
not even close.
But that's what I mean by having skill, that you can do anything. You know, there's no advantage to not having options. You know what I mean? It's correct. You may not want to play full tilt all the time, but you want to have the option of playing full tilt all the time.
Right.
You know what I mean? That to me is it's a false choice that's being made, and you know, it's almost always out of fear and feelings of inadequacy that people say things like, I just want to play with feel, or I'm just a
singer songwriter.
Yeah, that's like exactly, and it's like, well, you can do that and still know what you're doing. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean there's no, you'll hear people say things like, well, if I learn theory, I'm going to play by the book, or I'm going to play, and it's like, it's exactly the opposite of that. You know, it's, if you have knowledge, instead of one idea, you can have 10 ideas.
You know, if I didn't understand how modes work, I wouldn't be able to compose vocal melodies on my guitar and communicate
progressions
them to a
that make
singer.
sense, or secondary riffs that go over top of that. I mean, there's so many things you can't do if you don't know stuff, you know. And if you don't know things, you don't know, and you're going to be just inherently limited, you know.
And I think there's a certain virtuous cycle that can occur when, I mean, playing by ear is valuable. You need to be able to hear stuff and then interpret it and play it on your guitar.
Dude,
right?
I would say that like if you have a good ear, that's a major gift, because if you don't have a good ear, there's nothing you can do. You're born with that, or you're not.
That's right. I mean? That's it's almost like having a sense of rhythm. If you have a natural aptitude for rhythm, it's going to be so much easier.
Yeah, and you still
not
get
impossible,
there.
but you can still get there. Yeah, totally.
You know what I always tell people is, but the problem with people who are naturally gifted, I find, is they don't work as hard. They kind of rely on those gifts too much. And
I think I suffered from that in my early playing,
and that limits them too.
I remember. I was using the analogy.
It's like a wide receiver in the NFL who can run like a 4.3 or something, like super fast, super athletic. But maybe there's another guy who runs a 4.6, but is a much better, more productive receiver because they understand the route tree, they understand route recognition, what the defense is trying to do. They work hard at the entire craft. Yep. And then maybe they're not as gifted necessarily as the person who's like the 4.3 guy, but they're going to have a much better career and be able to do more things than that guy can, because they aren't relying just on their natural ability. They're doing all of it. You know what I mean? Yep. And I think that like a guy like Steve Vai is a great example of that, because I would argue Eddie Van Halen is severely more gifted than Steve Vai. But Steve Vai worked his ass off. Yep. And he is gifted. It's not he's not gifted, but he worked his ass off and then worked and forged himself into the guitar player he is.
Absolutely.
And he could do so many more things than Eddie could do in terms of his understanding of playing. Eddie Van Halen could do what Eddie Van Halen does.
Well, Eddie Van Halen, like Jimi Hendrix before him, was the first of a kind.
Yep. He was to show people what's possible.
Right, absolutely.
And was amazing in his own right. But as much as everybody who's probably heard any of these, because I'm the biggest Eddie Van Halen fan in the world. I love Eddie. He's my favorite guitar player of all time.
Yep.
But I mean, he just did what Eddie does. And he was brilliant. He could do a lot more than we probably think he could. But you couldn't drop him in the Zappa's band, and he wouldn't last 10 minutes in that band. You know what I mean? Because he just doesn't have that.
Few people would.
Yeah, exactly. Very few people would.
Maybe John McLaughlin.
Yeah, even him, maybe not.
Even then, maybe not. Yeah.
Yeah, and I look at that and I think like, I mean, Eddie does what Eddie does, and that's great. That's why he had Van Halen. He's one of the greatest who's ever done it. But he wasn't one of those guys that could do anything. Vai could do anything. Yep. You put him in and he anything. You know what I mean?
Even with one arm.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. Amazingly with one arm. Like incredibly incredible.
Dude, without a doubt.
But that's hard work. That's not gift. He didn't roll out of bed one day and be able to do that. That's just busting his chops over and over again for years. You know what I mean? Doing that. And, he's probably more physically gifted than Satriani. And Satriani's another guy who worked his ass off. The idea that he just rolled out of bed one day and that's just how he played.
Right. Just shaved all his hair off, put on some dark sunglasses, and then
I think there he is. I always equate that like virtuosic guitar playing to like an Olympic athlete. Like you see them do the floor routine, like, oh wow, that's amazing, that's cool. But the 20 years of training days, 6 hours a day that went into that. You know what I mean? It's like you just think that, that's cool.
Or anything. I was just watching a documentary about Marty Fish, a tennis player, and when he was a teenager, he was part of this tennis academy where the kids would wake and practice tennis for however many hours, go to tutoring, then come home and play tennis all day. And they would just do that for years as kids.
And you really don't appreciate how much goes into someone like a Roger Federer. Like to make someone at that level, you have to put so much time and effort in. And it's so funny. Every once in a while, talk to somebody about, okay, you got to work on this. You have to do these things. And they go, man, this is going to be a lot of work. And I go, yeah. Yep. It's going to be a lot of work, but you want to be good, right? You want to be a good player. So
and so then to that person, or to the person who's saying, yeah, I'm more of a feel guy. Yeah. There's this virtuous cycle that occurs where you play something that's new and different. And then while you're doing that, you're also getting used to how that sounds. And then it becomes part of the way that you play.
Yeah, it's an ever-growing circle of ability. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. So it it's or then and then you have a cool idea on your guitar, and maybe you do something that's a little bit different. Then you go find out, well, what was that thing that I did? Oh, I changed this note, and now it's this. Yep. Well, now I'm going to do this a little bit more. Then you get used to that sound.
Minor, then I realized I want to hit a major sixth, and that became Dorian.
And then you start hearing it in music you've been listening to already, and then you discover, oh wow, that's in that chord progression's in this mode.
Yeah.
I get it now. And then the sky opens up, and the angels sing, and it just keeps going that way.
And it's funny you've said that before, though. It's like a situation where like you kind of discover something, and now you feel like it's a new thing, but it really has always been there. You're using it whether you know it or not.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You're aware that that's Phrygian or not Phrygian. It doesn't matter. You're still using it either way. You know what I mean. But wouldn't it be better to be able to instantly dial it up? And so,
yeah, absolutely.
I want this feel. Boom, here's how I get it.
Hey, the frets divide every string into half steps. The theory's happening whether you know it or not.
Yep, exactly. So you can say you're playing with feel, but you're still playing with theory whether you like it or not.
There's a theory to describe what you're playing so you can understand it better, so you can do new and exciting things.
The only one who maybe is like Larry Lalonde from Primus. He just sort of falls down on the guitar and kind of whatever happens. Like he's like his music guitar playing is like onomatopoeia for guitar. Does that make sense?
He's like the Dr. Seuss of guitar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that being said, that's perfect for Primus, because if he was playing like regular parts, it wouldn't sound like Primus anymore.
Oh yeah, I would highly endorse the South Park anniversary concert.
No, yeah, that's right.
Oh, it's so good. I have a newfound respect for Les Claypool.
Yeah, I've always liked Les Claypool. I think he's a good player. For sure.
I just always blamed Les Claypool for ruining a generation of bass players. It's not because Les Claypool sucks. It's because all the imitators.
Yeah,
and maybe some people feel that way about Eddie Van Halen. I don't know.
I'm sure a lot of old schoolers think that way about Eddie Van Halen, because that the whole generation after. I always find it so amazing when people try and complain that Eddie wasn't that influential. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
hugely influential.
Everything changed after Van Halen came out. Everything.
We're sitting here right now because Eddie lived.
Yeah, and also 15 years after, everything musically was trying to catch up with Van Halen. So don't try and tell me he wasn't influential. It's like, yeah, I don't know. That's crazy. That's probably a good place to wrap up, though. So
yeah.
All right, guys. So long story short, I think don't make excuses for limitations. Work on them.
Don't be afraid to learn. It's fun.
Here's a real good haiku for you. Things you don't do well don't get better by not practicing them. Words to live by. So
wow, that's a haiku.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a haiku or not, but
okay.
I'm just gonna say it's a haiku. Like people don't know. So
wait, isn't a haiku like 7 syllables, 5 syllables, and then 7 syllables?
I don't know. I think what I just said was a haiku. I'm gonna say what I said was a haiku.
Okay, I think Scott and I just committed to writing haikus about practicing.
I did not.
Okay, well, you know what? I'm gonna.
I have not committed
and it'll
to that.
debut on an upcoming episode.
All right.
So all of you out there, write your own haikus.
Exactly.
And practice. You can write a haiku about it.
And practice so you can actually play with the feel that you claim to be playing with.
Yes.
All right. So thank you so much for listening to the Rock Guitar Confidential podcast with Brian and Scott. We will have socials up shortly. Please make sure to rate and subscribe this podcast with a 5-star review only. That's the only option, really.
5-star. Well, unless there's some way that you can get like a 6-star review into the 5-star.
I'm not sure if Tim Cook has a method to that or what's going on, but
maybe he can. Well, yeah. I'm sure he's in another dimension too.
That's true. He's out there with the guy fighting. He's probably fighting Liu Kang right now. For all we know.
Right? Yeah, he took over in the tournament. So when he gets back,
when he finishes him.
Yes.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for
everybody.
listening. Bye.
Peace.